Welcome to In Real Time, where we as Heights Church are inviting you in for real conversations about leading people, organizations, and change in the new normal. We're hoping that our real discussions about our church's journey will help you as you reimagine and rebuild yours. Well, hello, Craig here, and welcome to In Real Time, where we're having real conversations about leading people, organization, and change. And, well, before we get into our topic, I'm joined by two co-hosts. And before I introduce them, don't forget, hit like, subscribe, and the bell notification so you don't miss one episode. Had to get that in, definitely, because I know you're going to love this episode. All right, so my two co-hosts, why don't you introduce yourselves today?
I'm Jennifer Alessio, and I serve as the children's pastor here at Heights Church, and I'm joined by my friend.
Oh, I'm Justin Orr, and I am the life groups pastor.
That's really good. All right, so you guys made up in the break. That's nice. Okay.
Yeah, we're friends again.
Like
the first
ferocious
place.
just a few minutes ago. So very, very good. So what is our topic today? It's a good one.
Navigating controversial issues.
Oh, yeah.
Because we haven't had anything like COVID, masks, vaccines, racial tensions,
Wars,
politics, nothing like that.
Nothing like that at all.
Nothing difficult
Nothing.
Yeah.
No.
or controversial at all
Never arises.
in the past 3 years.
Ever. Yeah.
So that's what
Of course, we've had a lot of that. Steady stream.
Yeah.
A waterfall of all of those things.
Flood.
And way more. Way more.
Literally every other week, there's something new.
And we live in
Feels that way
California.
sometimes, doesn't it? It's like, what's new this week?
Yeah, because we live in California, which is the hotbed of everything weird and ridiculous that starts in the country. We're right at the forefront of that edge. And so every bill that's coming through our state house is controversial, it seems like. And so, there's a lot that we're dealing with. So
what we're really talking about is how in the world do we navigate all that stuff?
Yeah,
Like,
it's
how
so
do you
good.
decide whether to talk about it, not to talk about it? And so we have a grid. So that's what we're going to talk about.
And how to talk about it and when to talk about it.
Yep. So we do have a grid, and that's really the point of this podcast, is to just help people think about what could be your grid. Because everybody needs a grid. But I'll be honest with you, this is the first church I've ever been at, and I've been at 4. And the other 3, to my knowledge, there was no existing grid. There was just randomly things would be said, and we didn't really get in on whether or not that was going to be said. We just heard it along with everybody else. And so, we all need a strategy. We need a grid. And if you don't have one, we're going to share ours with you today so that you can then say, I love that. Or you could say, I don't like that. Fine, we don't care. We just want you to think about what is your grid.
Yeah.
This is ours. What's your grid? And so that you will make really good decisions about what you say, when you say it, why you would talk about that.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because people are looking for consistency. And I think about it from a pastoral lead perspective. Very often, if I don't have a grid, then our staff, our board, they're going to be left with, why did he talk about that, but he didn't talk about other things? But you guys may not want to ask me that question. Mm-hmm. And you know what? I don't want that kind of muddy. I want clarity about why we're doing this, because you're going to be the ones a lot of people are going to come talk to.
Exactly. And as a staff pastor, I really appreciate that we've already talked about it ahead of time. Mm-hmm. I know your thoughts on it. I know your heart, and I know how you want us to respond.
Yeah.
That's so much better than, let me get back to you, which is better than saying the wrong thing, for sure. But at least I know ahead of time how to respond.
Yeah.
It's so helpful.
No, it's really good. I've served under 2 pastors. One of them, I'd say both of them written articles. And I've had people come to me and ask me, okay, so they wrote this article, they said this. What are they saying and what do they mean by that? And I had to say to both of them, or I said about both of them, I had to say, I'm actually not sure.
Wow.
Because they didn't tell me. They just wrote the articles and put it out there, and there was no discussion about it. And I was truthfully afraid to ask them because I didn't know and was pretty sure that if I asked the question, it was going to be not good. So, you know what? Let's just clear it all up. let's just create clarity. And we have a grid. What's number one on the grid that helps us make this decision?
We got to remember too, these are in no particular order. So when
Correct.
you hear us say that, it just simply means that these are on our list.
Yeah.
First one is this. We don't get political in that we're not going to speak about political parties. You need to vote this way. You need to do this thing. You need to say this thing. We're going to keep the main thing, because when we get political, whether we pick an issue, a person or a policy or something like that, we have other things that help measure that. But we end up chasing rabbits everywhere, and we end up chasing these trails, and then we end up missing the main thing, which is about transform lives through Jesus.
Yeah.
That's why we're here.
That's why we're
to
here.
keep Jesus at the forefront and watch him do the work that he wants to do in the lives of people.
Yeah. If we don't have that as our purpose, we don't have another purpose. That is our purpose.
That is our purpose. Yeah.
The Bible makes that very clear.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing here. Yeah. So I love that, because the whole political thing is it is a quagmire. And, but at the same time, I think number 2 on our grid would help us to balance that out, because so when people say, oh, it's a political issue, it's not always the case, because there are definitely things we speak to.
Yes.
And they are controversial, but we want to always bring that from a biblical perspective. So number 1 on our grid, is this political? If it is, then we're not going to talk about it. But what's number 2?
Is it a moral issue?
Which
we do talk about.
We do talk about.
And we look to the Bible. The Bible is our source. And so we're asking, where is it written? And that's going to tell us. We are going to speak to things that are evil.
Yep.
We are going to speak to things that are wrong,
Yes.
because the Bible's very clear about it.
Yes.
And we should speak to that.
Right.
Because part of our mission is to equip our people to think biblically. We want them to think that way, and they are looking to us for that.
They are. Yeah. And should.
We hope so.
Point of why we exist.
Yes.
Yes, to make disciples.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I love that. And so honestly, a lot of the things that people do want to talk about, they really are moral issues. I mean, I know people want to say, I'll just bring this one up. We spoke to the issue of Roe v. Wade before the Supreme Court spoke to it. I didn't need to wait for them to weigh in.
Right.
What we did is we spoke to the moral issue. Here's what I do know. We may not know every piece of that topic. You may not have every question answered. And if I wait until I do, I'll never say anything.
That's true.
But what I do know is there are certain things we understand the Bible on. We know what it says, and we can speak to those issues. One thing I know is that God is for life.
Yes.
And so ahead of the decision, we were able to say as a church, this is where we're at. This is God's heart on this issue. And so without going further into that conversation, which of course we can, just to know that is a topic that many would say is political, and we would say, well, actually, it's moral. And so, we're going to speak to that. God's heart is revealed. And are there other things that Scripture does speak to? Well, then we're going to speak to it because God's heart has been revealed on that.
Yes.
Yeah. So very important on that. Very important.
I think the next one too is, asking the question, what's your motive? Is the motive because am I being pressured into this?
Yeah.
Is the crowd trying to get me to speak on this issue because it's this hot button political issue, even though it's not moral, it's not about Jesus. It's just this group of people wanting me to say something about it. Or am I trying to appease them? Really, what's my motive? Am I trying to build bridges, or am I trying to burn down bridges? I mean, because that's the other thing that I could be doing with my motives.
Yeah.
I'm already so emotionally charged about this issue. Am I letting that get in the way of God's heart in the midst of this?
Yeah.
Am I being defensive? Like, am I just to the point where I can't even see the possibility that I might be wrong? Am I teachable in the midst of it? I think all of those questions about motive, those really matter. And so we have to ask that, and we have to wrestle with that through this process.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, and I think that's a very important part of the grid for me personally, because I know that, so the answer is yes, I am emotional about it, very likely.
Yeah.
And when I'm emotional, that's not when I should be talking.
Yes.
I'm going to be shooting from the hip, and I'm going to say some things that I'm going to have to apologize for later. And I want to say this, not necessarily what I said, but the way I said
Yes,
it. And see,
that's so
that's
important.
the actual problem. I know what the Bible says about that topic.
Right.
But how I say it is so crucial to the person hearing me, hearing God's heart. And it can sound very different than what God intended it if my emotions are taking over and getting the better of me. And so I need to make sure that by the time I actually come to either that statement being made in a service, the sermon I might give, maybe a series that I would give, or if it's going to be a prayer that I'm going to offer, or there's been sometimes we made an email video that I would put out. By the time I get to that place, I need to know that my motive for being there is right.
Well, and that's really the next
The
point,
next
is
one.
being in the right heart and mind.
Yeah.
Like, am I in the right space emotionally, mentally to speak to this?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you've been explaining that this whole time. And
I think something to say about that too that really goes with both of these is motive, heart, mind, being in the right place. It really comes down to, do I want to speak to this right now? And both of these are true. They're both inside of me very often, most of the time. Do I want to speak to it because I want to spout off and I want to emote? Or do I want to speak to this because I want to help people find the Jesus path forward?
And that's really, really good.
Yeah. But most of the time, my first gut reaction is I want to emote.
Oh, yeah.
I want to tell people off.
Let me tell you.
I'm just being honest. That's where I want to be.
No, it's true.
So I need to back away from that, and I need to find the Jesus path forward. Then I can be helpful. Then I can teach, and I can come at it from a really good motive. I'm always going to get a better response when I do that.
And hopefully end up with an outcome you can live with and that you're happy with.
Yes. It's
You
about the
thinking
outcome.
about what is my outcome here? What's the goal in mind?
Yeah.
And if our hearts aren't in the right place, we're typically not going to end up in the place we want to be.
That's right.
We're going to end up with damage, and we'll have to fix it.
Yeah.
And
My
it's not
goal-
helpful.
My goal is to make a disciple. Is
Exactly.
to persuade people to the heart of God. That's my goal. Yeah. So, but that's not always where I'm really at in the beginning. I got to get there sometimes. So very good. What else is on there?
The next one is to predetermine what you will and won't say.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of wisdom in that.
Yeah.
This one I definitely think comes after 3 and 4, which is, what my motive are.
So true.
Let me get my heart right. Okay,
Yeah.
here's what we're going to say, and here's what we're not going to say.
Right.
Like, I think this one follows. So if there's an order, this one is not necessarily one that you want to put at the front, because
Right.
if you're emotional,
Yeah.
well, let me tell you what I'm going to say.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
the time not to say something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
And it leads us to the next one, which
Yeah.
is to seek counsel. Because when you seek counsel, and you do this often, Pastor Craig, you'll bring a topic up at our
'cause I
management
need it.
team meetings.
Yes.
And we all sit here, and it's a gift for all of us because we're all able to process and get out, our hearts and our thoughts about it.
Yeah.
And by the time we end up in a spot where we're like, okay, we're going to say this. We're not going to say that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it comes from getting different perspectives.
Yeah.
And that's something I really value about our management team. We have so many different personalities. There's a varying of ages
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
And different levels of just wisdom and experience. And it's really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. And you may be listening and thinking, well, you're just saying you don't want to say this because you don't want to step in it. And
Not
that's not what we're
necessarily.
talking about. We don't want to say certain things because they're confusing.
Exactly.
And we had that discussion actually just this morning about a statement that I made and a prayer that I offered to our church around a controversial issue. I shouldn't even say it's not controversial to us, but it is a difficult issue that's happening in our world today. And we wanted to speak to it, and we wanted to pray in regards to that. And I was wanting to make sure that we don't go into certain areas because it's just confusing, because I didn't have longer to talk about it. So if you're going to say something, you got to unpack it. And if you don't have time to unpack it, then you probably ought not say it. because you're just going to create confusion around it. It's not that I don't want to step in it. It's because I don't want to create confusion.
Yeah.
So you have to think about it. How much time do you have?
Well, and I think
Do you have 2 minutes? Do you have 20 minutes? And that's why we don't talk on social media.
yeah, I was just
Because
about
you
to say
can't
that.
have
That's
a
literally why we
conversation.
don't post
Right.
about this stuff on
Right.
social media.
That's why we don't do it, because it's not long enough form
Right.
to explain our heart about it.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just a snippet, and it's going to be confusing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, and people read things through their own lenses anyway.
that's it, right?
So,
yeah, it's good.
you know, there's a difference between having a conversation with somebody face to face and explaining to them this is what God's heart is about this issue.
Yeah.
When I put that down on paper, people read it through the emotional state in which they're in.
Yeah,
And so they're going to read possibly anger and hostility coming from me, even though that is totally not what I intend
yeah,
as the writer of that.
Yep.
And so we've chosen that that's not the format for us
Yeah.
to do that. So we're going to do it, you know, verbally, publicly, where you can see us, where you can talk to us, where we can interact over these things.
yeah,
Because it's the most effective and successful way to be able to communicate your heart and God's heart about this issue.
yeah. Yeah, and I want to just say about that, really, just kind of on the side. I know that a lot of people say, no, it's social media, it's where culture's talking. And I'm not going to be forced into culture's strategy, because here's what I know. Culture is talking there, but they're not talking successfully there. And so if you really want to know what we think, if you actually want to know, we're happy to tell you.
Yeah.
We're clear about it. But you're going to need to go to the places we're having the conversation.
Right.
And if you're not willing to do that, then I don't know. You're going to have to just figure it out on your own, because we're not going to give you what you want, because it's going to be confusing, less clear. It's not what we want.
Well, it goes back to the motive.
It's a good grid.
Am I letting the peer pressure of the crowd force us
Yes.
into a discussion?
That's good.
In a place of discussion that I'm not willing to have that discussion.
So when we look at our grid, when we take a topic, we say, okay, is it political? Is it a moral issue? Does Scripture guide us? What's your motive? You want to be in the heart right and mind's heart
Right,
right
heart and mind.
Heart
There it
and
is.
mind.
and right mindset
it
to
is.
talk about it. Are we in that? Yes, I am. Okay, then we're ready to talk about it.
Yep.
Okay. And that doesn't mean we just wait around until that. That means I need to get there.
Yeah.
Because I need to talk to this. I need to speak to it. Predetermine what you will and won't say. And part of that has to do with there's a lot of things I may not know. So why would I speak to it? Part of it that I don't know, but I can speak to the piece that I do know.
Yeah.
Okay. And then seek counsel. And I want to just say something I say all the time. If Solomon needed counselors, then so do I. And so
Absolutely.
if someone's out there like, no, I don't have to talk to everybody. I kind of think you do. Yeah. Seek counsel. Who is your counselors? So here's the last part about this, though. If you're going to do this, and you should, there are certain things you will speak to. We do need to be ready for a response.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. People are going to say something. Whether you say something or not, they're going to come and ask you
How
questions.
come you didn't talk about this? Or why didn't you say that? Or
Yes.
how come you haven't addressed this in this issue on this?
Yeah.
Yeah, we get that kind of stuff all the time.
Yeah, of course. And rightly so. Our people want to know.
Right.
Right? And sometimes when they come to us, our answer is going to be, yeah, we're deciding we're not going to actually speak to that issue because it doesn't fit the grid.
Right.
Or, oh yeah, we're going to be talking about it. It's going to come next week.
Right.
And you can wait for that. But here in a nutshell is what we're going to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we're clear. We have clarity about it in regards to moving forward. So I wanted to just tell you guys, though, about a response a response that I had to this last week. We actually offered a prayer for Israel, and I'm glad we did it. I'd do it again, absolutely. As a church, we want to direct our people to be able to pray for Israel and their protection and God's heart in this whole issue. And I had a lady come to me afterwards, and she asked me a question about my prayer, and she brought up a good point, honestly. But when she asked me the question, I knew that in the moment, you know what, I need to know more. And so I just said something that was very helpful. And so it's definitely a tool that I think is helpful for all of us to think about. I just simply asked her, can you unpack that question for me? And what was good about that is that I got to let her talk more about it, which had a good effect because number one, she was needing to say more. Okay. It helped her get it out. Number two, it gave me a greater perspective on what she was actually asking me. And it was a little different than what I initially thought she was asking me and why. And so it was really helpful.
Yeah.
And it gave me a moment to think about her question. And the truth is, it was a really good question. And I told her, you know what? You have changed my mind on this to a degree. I need to add. There was something I missed in the prayer.
Yeah.
And I told her, I will add that in the prayer as we move forward. She was right. And it was good. And it reflected the heart of God.
Yeah.
And, there wasn't anything I had done wrong in this whole thing. I didn't need to be wrong for her to still offer helpful advice to me.
Yeah.
But you have to remain humble in these things if you're going to make statements.
Yeah.
But if you're in the right heart, in the right mind, you know your motive is pure, and you've really allowed God to speak to this issue, and you're just bringing his heart, then you don't have to be defensive about it. And you can listen for his voice in those conversations and let him guide you. And just, I could even just hear the Holy Spirit just saying, just listen. Just listen. And it was good. And then I didn't have to come with a defensive knee-jerk reaction, which is my nature. But God was able to help me and give me self-control, and I was able to respond in a much better way. And you know what? That's what we want.
Yeah.
It is.
I'm human like anybody else, and I can step in it. And I don't want to do that. I want to be helpful.
But it could have gone in a much different way.
Yeah, it could have.
If your heart wasn't in the right place,
Yeah.
if you're defensive, then maybe you would have been upset and she might not have been so happy afterwards.
Right. Yeah. And the truth is, I have been upset in years past as I would make a statement about something or talk about a controversial issue. I might drive away from the service that day and go, man, what was wrong with me? Because I didn't actually walk through this grid. And so I didn't have the confidence that I should have had. But I drove away Sunday and thinking, nope, hey, we're solid. This was the right thing to do. I'm so glad we did it, and we'll do it again.
Yeah.
And that way I have confidence, and we're all together on the same page. So anyway, great conversation. Anything we need to add to this before we wrap it up?
No,
I think we covered everything.
Okay. I do too. And I hope this was really helpful. Again, this was our grid. This doesn't have to be yours. Take what you want, throw out the rest, but please have a grid. Think strategically about your grid.
Yeah.
And then you will have great confidence when these controversial issues do arrive. You'll know what to say, when to say it, or if you should say anything at all.
Yep.
So that's good. We're all making these choices, whether we want to say we're not, we are or aren't. We are, because we literally can't talk about everything.
Nope.
So the grid will help you to make that choice. Thanks for joining us today for a real conversation about leading people, organization, and change. And I know you like this episode, so hit the like and the bell notification, the subscribe. We'd love to have you join us, and then tell, 49 friends, because this could be helpful for them as well. Until next time, in real time.